Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the Alliance for Independent Authors for having invited us to come and put a seminar together for you on blockchain. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. I know there are many, many interesting seminars to choose from, and I am really pleased and glad that you've decided to join this one. So this is part of @SouthPubCon 2019, and the session you are joining is one that will focus on blockchain for creators, the future of content monetization, and the next era of digital interaction. So first, who am I? My name is Roanie Levy, and I am the CEO of Prescient Innovations and the President and CEO of Access Copyright. In a moment, I will tell you a little bit more about who Access Copyright is, since it is really the impetus for the work that we're doing with blockchain and the creation of Prescient Innovations. I've spent 2 decades really being a champion of creator rights, both domestically here in Canada and internationally. And in the last few years, I've spent quite a bit of time looking at the emerging technologies, especially blockchain, to see how it might impact the work that creators do. And I'm really pleased to be sharing some of our learnings in this session. So in this session, I will introduce blockchain. I'll talk a little bit about the reality versus the hype around blockchain. I will share with you our point of view on blockchain and its applications for creators. I will talk about a use case around fan-to-fan sale of ebooks that we're quite interested in and are building out, and would love to have you join us in our endeavors. And I will also speak about Prescient, which is the organization that is essentially now conducting the work that we are doing on blockchain. So first, a few words on who Access Copyright is. Access Copyright is a copyright management organization, and more specifically, we are a reproduction rights organization. We were created 30 years ago to deal with a new technology at the time, the photocopier. Increasingly, it was being used in educational institutions and businesses and governments to copy printed works. There was a lot of concern that it was cannibalizing on sales, and more importantly, there was concerns that creators were not able to monetize this kind of use of their works. So collectives, RROs, were created around the world in order to license the reuse of printed works. And Access Copyright specifically was created 30 years ago. And since our creation, we've distributed over $400 million in royalties back to creators and publishers. We are the collective voice of creators here in Canada. We represent over 12,000 visual artists and authors and over 600 publishers. And at the heart of what we do, really what it comes down to is rights management. We understand the needs of content creators and know the importance of accurately identifying rights holders. So let's take a small stroll down memory lane, revisiting how technology has evolved over the years. So as I mentioned, Access Copyright was created 30 years ago, as were reproduction rights organizations around the world. And we emerged as a result of the photocopier. That was the technology at that time. And we were created in order to deal with infringement, with piracy, with the copying, unauthorized copying of works that was happening. And here too, we were reacting to a technology. In the 2000s is when we see the emergence of the internet, and the use, or the unauthorized use of works skyrocketed. Here too, rights holders were reactive to the technology, dealing with the technology after it had been kind of installed and people were using works. Now today, we are looking to the future. There is much talk and much interest in how emerging technologies are going to redefine our digital lives, our digital interactions. Everybody talks about a kind of a second coming of the internet. And we are at the very early stages of that development. And the technologies that are mostly going to impact our future digital lives have to do with artificial intelligence and increasingly as well blockchain, also known as distributed ledger technology, or DLT. Today we're in a position to be proactive, to actually participate and be one of the architects of the new digital interactions. And that is a very exciting time to be doing this work. And when we consider how these technologies have impacted unauthorized use, if you think of the 80s, there was some unauthorized use. It felt like a lot at the time, but it did not compare at all to what happened in the 2000s. So by the 2000s, the unauthorized use was on steroids. And as we look to the future, the risk and what we must plan for and ensure that the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure of the future doesn't do is exacerbate the amount of unauthorized use that is happening and make it even more difficult for creators to get their just rewards. Let's make sure that as we look to the future, we are fixing some of the challenges we are faced today with the technology and unauthorized use and the ability to properly monetize on our works instead of exacerbating the problem. So technology has resulted in creators having limited control over their content. There is ubiquitous availability and subsequent commoditization of content. Creative works and piracy issues are rampant. Discoverability is difficult, and there's a compromise. This has all compromised the interests of creators and users. When we look at piracy, as I said, piracy is rampant, and it often renders copyright law and digital rights management ineffectual. On the discoverability side, there's an abundance of content, and it has made it difficult to stand out or to be discovered. When we think of value distribution, we look at how platforms have taken over much of the interactions or the new middlemen in content today. And the value driven by creative works is today often unfairly distributed across various actors in the content value chain. And creators have never experienced more exposure and been paid so little for their content. And on the user side, the end user has limited means to verify and trust that the information provided, that the content provided about a creative work or its creators is in fact accurate. And so the question we ask ourselves as we stand at this point in time in history where we are foreseeing a huge new wave of digital transformation is how might we leverage the new technologies to disrupt this state of affairs in order to ensure and enhance the value of creative works to creators and users alike. So when we imagine the future, there are three questions we ask ourselves. What if creators did fully control how the works are used? What if users can easily discover trusted content? And what if the exchange of value generated by content was transparent? What might the future of rights management look like? So we believe that distributed ledger technology, machine learning, or artificial intelligence has the potential to rewrite our digital interactions. You will have heard, if you've been following talk about blockchain and artificial intelligence, people talk about the second era of the digital age. And we believe that these technologies have the potential to give control back to creators and to publishers. These technologies can enable new economic structures that will ensure that rights information is unassailable and acknowledged in active financial transaction involving content. Content will have its own unique ID that will be connected to the rights holders. Creative works will have the potential to operate as self-contained businesses. There will be a transparent line of sight into how a work generates value, and there will be a more equitable distribution of value from the creative works along those that participate in the success of the work. And we've already seen the technology start making its way through various parts of the economy. So the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. So we started to see the new age of digital disruption in various pockets. It started in financial services. We're seeing a lot of activity as well in supply chain and other industries. But before we talk about what it might mean to creators, let's unpack a little bit what blockchain is. The blockchain is essentially the coming together of three technologies that have existed for a while. P2P, and that's kind of Napster for those that were active back then, cryptography, and behavioral economics. So it's the coming together of these three technologies in a novel way that has opened up this potential. The best definition I found for blockchain is the one that's up on the screen, but let's unpack it together. So in essence, the blockchain is a shared, programmable, cryptographically secure, and therefore trusted ledger which no single user controls and which can be inspected by anyone. So the reference to programmable is a reference to something that you will have heard about called smart contract. It's essentially that this database kind of operates like a small software program and can execute on if-then statements. If this happens, then do that. So that programmable aspect of a blockchain, of information that's on a blockchain, is quite powerful, and we'll see how in a few moments. So it's a ledger, and a ledger is essentially a list of digital records. And these digital records are grouped together, and these groupings of digital records are called blocks. And these groupings of digital records called blocks are linked together by cryptography, hence the term blockchain. Everything is timestamped in a blockchain and transparent. So, list of records linked together by cryptography, time-stamped, transparent, that can execute, let's call it simple commands of if-then nature. Information held on a blockchain exists as a shared and continually reconciled database. So I've mentioned some of these already, but it's worth going through it again. Blockchains are transparent. Now, not all blockchain participants are able to view data added to the chain. It depends on what kind of blockchain you're dealing with. If it's a public blockchain, then the world is able to see the data that's on the blockchain. If it's a private blockchain, then only authorized participants are able to see the data that is on a blockchain. And it is possible to also have hybrid blockchains where some of the data is viewed by the world and some of the data is only viewed by authorized participants. Now, this transparency is what brings on trust. That's where the characteristic of trust comes from. And in October 2015, The Economist had a cover story on blockchain, and it called blockchain the trust machine. Blockchain's connected data blocks establishes the trust. Now, the trust is in the data, not in the participants, but the trust is in the data. And because we can trust the data, we do not need to know the participants, and we don't need to trust the participants in the transaction because we can trust the data. Now, by enabling transparency and trust, you can now see how blockchain will replace some of the activities traditionally required to establish this trust in the past. So the easy one to think about is like the bank that's in the middle of of a transaction between two people. This will lead to fewer third parties. It does not mean that all intermediaries will disappear. Roles of intermediaries will change over time, given that there is less of a need for the role of trust to happen via an intermediary. And the last characteristic that I'd like to mention about blockchain is that blockchains are auditable. So blockchain data is immutable. It is everlasting. It creates an exhaustive means of record keeping. People talk about blockchain as being tamper evident. You could see if data has been tampered with. People refer to blockchains as being append only. So if you need to correct data, you need to append new data. So there is always a trail of the data that happens that is available on a blockchain. All right. So some reality versus hype. What is the state of the technology today? So we're still in the very early days of blockchain and of this technology, and it's changing very, very rapidly. Now, having said that, it's sufficiently evolved and mature so that we can start seeing and have started seeing the implementation of blockchain technologies in certain aspects of the economy. There are questions of scalability, particularly vis-a-vis public blockchains. And there are questions as well about the interoperability of blockchains, because at this point, I'm sure you have realized that there is more than one blockchain. Early adopters, as I said, are already reimagining new business models. And we are already seeing the use of blockchain kind of coming into various areas of the economy. But mass adoption will take time. It will probably require a killer app, such as email. The way email was, if you like, the killer app that brought everybody online. Now, the last thing is that blockchain is not a panacea. It is not an answer to every problem. It is not all use cases that require a blockchain. If there is no need for a shared database that is used by multiple parties, there's probably no need for a blockchain. If only one entity generates transactions and modifies the repository, no need for a blockchain. However, if there is mistrust that exists between the parties that generate transactions, then blockchain may be an interesting technology to look at. More than one gatekeeper to enforce trust, blockchain may be interesting to look at. If there are interactions or dependencies between transactions that are created by different entities, again, this is another situation where blockchain may be an interesting technology to look at. One question that I've often asked is blockchain going to eliminate piracy? Unfortunately, the answer today is I don't think so. It will provide new avenues for content monetization. It will allow to identify certain pirated works. It will allow the ability to stream work so that where players want to make sure that the work is not pirated, they have the ability to do so. But outright eliminating piracy is unlikely for the foreseeable future. Let's spend a little bit of time now looking at how to think about blockchain in the context of content and content monetization. So we started working on blockchain and learning about blockchain about 2.5 years ago. And one of the things that we wanted to be able to do was to discuss blockchain, as we got really excited about the technology, with the members of Access Copyright, who are creators and publishers. And it was a hard thing to explain. And so in order to help us be better about educating about blockchain, we came up with this framework that we ended up calling the 3 A's of smart content. So just like your TV, when it becomes a smart TV, when you have a smart TV versus just one of those old plain TVs, now you're able to interact with your TV. Your TV can deliver information to you, and you could ask your TV things that in the past you couldn't. There was no interaction. So same thing with smart content. There's a lot more interaction with the content that is now possible. And the 3 A's refer to attribution, authentication, and automation. So attribution is content that knows who its creators and rights owners are. As the content circulates and moves around and gets used, you at any time can ping it and know exactly who the rights holders and creators are, and have a means to contact them. Authentication is content that knows who is authorized to use it, who has access rights to the content. And automation is content that can transact on its own without third-party interference based on defined rules. Some use cases will rely just on attribution. Other use cases will rely on 2 of the 3 A's, and some use cases, as we imagine the future of content monetization and rights management, will rely on all 3 of the 3 A's. But let me give you examples of those 3 A's in action. Some of the examples I will give is related to the content industry, and some are in other areas, but you can see the proxy or how that can be relevant for content. So For attribution, a good example of an attribution use case is food tracking on the blockchain. So Viant is a company that does food tracking. The thinking there is that you are able to trace, for example, a fish from the place that it is fished to your plate in a restaurant or to a store. Same thing with meat from the farm to the store. You could trace the meat. So if there's a recall, then you know exactly which packages of meat that need to be recalled, and you don't have to do these mass recalls. And Walmart has already implemented the use of blockchain for food tracking. Another example that's often given and being piloted is tracking conflict minerals. Ledger is a London-based company that tracks diamonds by putting on blockchain attributes of the diamond and the certificate number that's also etched on the crown of the stone. An example of authentication is, let's say that students and teachers have pre-authorized access to content. So their institutions have already licensed access to a piece of content, and just based on their blockchain profile, they're able to unlock access to that content. Another example of authentication would be with Blockchain for Change. That is a New York City startup which provides homeless people with a smartphone that is preloaded with blockchain identities and which provides the homeless person access to various services. So the profile of the homeless person and the connection of that profile to certain services unlocks things for them. An example of automation is UJO, which is a blockchain that allows for a clear and transparent framework using smart contracts to distribute royalty payments at the point of purchase of the musical work. So as we worked and did a lot of research on blockchain, we asked ourselves, is this real? All of these amazing promises of blockchain seem like, you know, nirvana for creators. Will it really happen this way? And can blockchain really deliver on these promises? And at the time when we were looking at this, there were very few use cases that were actually being piloted. There were lots of white papers and proof of concepts, but there was very little out there that was actually being piloted. And we thought, well, let's come up with an idea that today's technology would make it very difficult to do, but that blockchain promises to make simple. And then let's see if we could kind of build our own proof of concept. So this was, you know, a thought exercise, not really an activity to develop a product that we knew we wanted to put out in the market. It was a way to continue our understanding of where blockchain might take us into the future. And so we brainstormed about various different ideas that when we looked at the characteristics and the 3 A's might be possible, different use cases. And we came up with this idea that we later called influencer, which is the fan-to-fan sales of ebooks. So we all know about P2P sharing and the Napster days and, you know, Pirate Bay, etc. But what if we actually monetize that P2P, peer-to-peer, fan-to-fan interaction, so that when the exchange happened, there would be eventually a purchase, And when that exchange of value took place, the authors and the other rights holders would be automatically compensated based on predefined rules. So the use case that you're seeing up there on the screen is Sarah's reading a book and thinks that Jack will like it. So she recommends the book to Jack. And Jack is now, as a result of the recommendation by Sarah, able to preview the book. And how much Jack is able to preview is dependent on the creator or the publisher's decision. Maybe it's 10% of a work. Maybe it's till chapter 4 because something really happens in chapter 5, and if you read till chapter 4, you'll definitely want to read chapter 5. Whatever it may be, based on the individual work. Now Jack, after having previewed the work, actually wants to move to chapter 5 and decides to purchase the book. Jack buys the book, and money is then, at the point of sale, redistributed to the various authors of the book, the publisher, perhaps the jacket cover artist, perhaps a small percentage to the photographer. It's really limitless, the number of contributors that can then share in the value that was generated by the work. And in this use case, we thought, what if Sarah, who stimulated the sale by Jack, got a reward for having influenced the purchase? So these are the kinds of things that the 3 A's would generate. Attribution, the work circulates, and we know who the author and other rights holders are. Authentication, Jack is now able to view the work after having purchased it, or is able, based on his profile as a connected fan to Sarah, to view X percentage of the work. And automation, a smart contract connected to the work, automatically executes royalty distributions based on predefined rules. 3 A's in action. So we said, okay, can we build it? We reached out to a few young men here in Toronto. We're lucky in Toronto because there's a lot of people that are active in the blockchain space. And we said, can we build a proof of concept? Let's just give it a try. Would it be hard? Is this possible? And they said, yeah, it's possible. We could do it. And we did. It took just a couple of months, and we were able to build out this proof of concept. And to be clear, kind of the web interface into this Santa world was not pretty. Like, we didn't spend any time there at all or any money on that at all. It was really about the mechanics behind the scenes to see whether they would work. And they worked. And it was super, super exciting to go through that exercise of thinking up this idea and then making the mechanics work. And through that exercise, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to actually experience it. Through that exercise, it gave us kind of like this window to peer into the future. And now we got it. We got why people were so excited about how blockchain technology was going to transform digital interaction. Now it felt real. The disruption that people are talking about felt real to us. And it also, in a very weird way, felt imminent. Now, what surprised us was that instead of getting super excited or only getting super excited, we also got super concerned. As I started out by saying, access copyright was created to ensure that creators get paid for the work. That's what's in our DNA. We exist to make sure that creators get paid so that they can continue creating great content. And as we worked through the workflow of this service, we kept asking ourselves, but who is going to validate and make sure that the person that is putting this work into this new blockchain ecosystem or in this blockchain transaction is in fact the rightful owner? And that the value that is now flowing through these new relationships, through these new digital interactions, is going to the right people. Who is going to validate and make sure that that happens? We started looking around other use cases, proofs of concepts, and minimum viable products that were being tested out that involved content. And we would ask that question of all of those use cases. How are they making sure that the attribution is accurate? That the value exchange that is now happening without an intermediary is ending up in the right pockets? And the answer we got, more often than not, was that these services are relying on what we ended up calling blind faith or misplaced trust. When someone uploads the work into a service, a digital service, they are asked to check a box that they do in fact own the copyright. And then off it goes. No other verification is done. For anybody that's worked in this space, and for all creators, you all know very well that if the rights information used in the digital service is not reliable, everything that happens after that simply cannot be trusted. And blind faith does not work all the time. In fact, it fails far too often. So the promise that we have been told as we researched blockchain back 2.5, 3 years ago, and this is a quote from Don Tapscott, also a Canadian: "We believe that the economy works best when it works for everyone, and this new platform, blockchain, is an engine of inclusion." And often when people make reference to these statements, the engine of inclusion is kind of to bring back those that are in the periphery, and in our world, those are the creators, so that things center around the creators. The creators are now included in the transaction instead of moved towards the periphery. But our proof of concept showed us the dark side of blockchain. And we were concerned that from piracy on steroids, that we're actually going to see 10x the problem. We were concerned that the next era of digital interaction might in fact cement the existing challenges caused by the internet: rampant piracy and monetization of content by someone other than the lawful owner. Remember that when something is on a blockchain, it's hard to take it back. That some information on the blockchain, while transparent, some of it is anonymous or pseudo-anonymous. In that context, there are a lot of bad actors that can take advantage of this new technology. consider also that when we were dealing with the internet, the incentive for bad actors was about getting more eyeballs to the website, being able to generate revenue through a share of ad dollars. In a blockchain world, we're seeing more direct value exchange. Value exchange that is akin to dollars passing hands. And you could see in that context the incentive for bad actors. And so we have started fearing that the game of whack-a-mole may in fact be on steroids. And the game of whack-a-mole, and you know what it is. Your pirated book shows up on one website, you do a notice and takedown, you finally get it off after endless effort, and then it pops up on another website. And it's just this endless game of trying to take things down. And we may, in fact, be wishing for the good old days of Napster and BitTorrent. So this is when we realized that the key pain point, the key problem to solve is the attribution problem. It's absolutely vital that we understand what's coming if we are to have an influence and have a say on how the new era of digital interactions develop in the coming years. If we're going to architect our future and ensure that we optimize the opportunities for creators, publishers, users, that we strengthen instead of weaken IP laws, that there is a fair and equitable management of data and information, that we be part of the development of this new technology. And we have to start by solving the attribution problem, by making sure that this is part of the technology stack of the new digital interaction. And we define attribution as the ability to connect a creative work to its lawful creator and rights owner in a reliable and authoritative manner. Why is attribution important? This is probably, the next two slides are probably, unnecessary but fun. So I'll go through them anyways. They're unnecessary for this audience because I think you understand it at its core of why attribution is important. So if you were to look up on the internet, an eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind, you will see it attributed to many people. But mostly you will see it attributed to Gandhi. But really, the most likely attribution is to George Perry Graham, who is a Canadian politician and I believe was recorded as having said it back in 1915 or thereabouts. This is another example of a quote which is often misattributed. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. It's most often attributed to Mark Twain, but more likely it's Jonathan Swift that came up with this, as based on when these various people lived and when there is a recorded transcript of them having said that, most likely to be Jonathan Swift. Now the point is that we shouldn't have to question who actually said what, who created what. That should really be a problem of the past. Given the promises of these new technologies, if we must do away with misplaced trust. And it is incumbent on us to use blockchain to finally do away with this. And to do that, we need to ensure that there's a kind of an attribution layer that is between the content creators and providers and the digital services that use the content. There would be an attribution ledger as part of this attribution layer. There would need to be a well thought through and inclusive governance structure. And there will also need to be a well thought through dispute resolution as part of this attribution layer. The attribution ledger will be blockchain powered, so it'll be a shared ledger. Some of the information about a work will be open, public, and transparent. It will create and establish a clear connection between the rights holders and their works, so that as the work circulates in digital services, there is always a link back to the rights holders. And by having that, it will allow the creation of new services and the use of verified rights information by digital service providers. And over time, what we believe we will see is the attribution ledger enabling a seamless flow between content creation and consumption. So the life cycle of content creation, publication, and consumption will, at all of its phases, be connected to the ledger or connected back to the creators. Reliable and authoritative attribution will allow better rights protection. So as I mentioned, content on the blockchain is time-stamped. It's stored with a unique ID along with ownership details and access rights. It will allow royalty distributions, so it will enable revenue channels through self-executing smart contracts that automate licensing and royalties distribution transparently and in near real time. We will see new user interactions. We'll see a lot more direct creator-to-consumer interactions, which will alter the value exchanges compared to what we see today. And it will provide trusted content. It will provide consumers access to content which has been reliably and authoritatively attributed. So this initiative is a purpose-driven initiative. It is to be creator-centric. It will put the creator at the center of the emerging digital ecosystem. It will be open, so an open ledger, open data. We'll develop a public, auditable ledger that curates and maintains ownership claims. And it will provide an identity system for content. And this identity system will be the underlying technology infrastructure used by content transacting services. We believe that we're at the precipice of something new, promising, and potentially revolutionary for creators, rights holders, and audiences. And we have created a new organization, Prescient, in order to take our work to the next level. We created Prescient last summer. It's a separate organization, wholly owned by Access Copyright. And Prescient will partner with creator, publisher orgs, tech organizations, domestically and internationally, to explore the future of rights management and content monetization. Prescient exists as access copyright to ensure creators and publishers are fairly paid for the use of their works, and users have access to trusted content. We believe that the exchange of value generated by content should be transparent, and we are using exponential technologies like blockchain and machine learning to build dynamic ecosystems that reimagine content interaction. And we've started building out the services. To demonstrate the value of the Attribution Ledger and to seed its adoption, we're collaborating with other creator associations on innovative use cases for the ledger. The first one that we're building out is, in fact, this proof of concept, the influencer proof of concept I spoke about a few minutes ago, a service that allows creators and rights holders to activate their fan base, that create P2P interactions that ensure that the value generated returns to the creators and that rewards the fan at the same time. So the influencer product, which will probably get renamed at one point, but this fan-to-fan interaction product will allow creators to launch campaigns that activate their fans and leverage their fans' recommendations to stimulate sales and engage with their fans. It will also include real-time distribution of funds at the point of sale. The benefit of the fan-based service is that it enables a new distribution, discoverability, and promotional channel. There'll be distribution of royalties automatically in near real time. It will provide creators a line of sight into how their work is transacted upon and how their fan, if you like, span out. And eventually, as the service develops, we have plans to leverage game theory principles to incentivize certain behaviors on the platform. And we want to work with you. We want to have you involved as we build this service out and build the Attribution Ledger out. If you are interested, please do reach out to us. The email address is info@prescientinnovations.com. We are putting together a virtual working group of independent authors so we can fully understand your unique needs and perspectives. And we would love to have you be a part of the future of rights management and content monetization. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for your attention. I do encourage you again to email us at the info@prescientinnovations.com, or you could email me personally at rlevy@prescientinnovations.com, or Sapa Naring, who is leading our innovation efforts, at snaring@prescientinnovations.com. Thank you again for your attention, and we look forward to hearing from you.